Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3350. Today's date is 5th of March 2025. It's been almost like a night at 9:31 p.m. All right, yeah. Okay, so should we directly jump into the question? All right, let's go. Let's jump into the question. Okay, yeah. Question is, how do you think a great invention start from observation, necessity, or imagination? Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, where is this question came from? All right. Couple of weeks ago, I was actually watching the Demons of Leonardo. It's a web series. This web series is actually based on Leonardo da Vinci. If you don't really know who is that person, the person who draw the Mona Lisa painting, world famous painting, which is actually drawn by the Leonardo. He is like a master of multiple things. He is not just a painter. He is like a really great inventor. When he thought, his thought process is kind of like a really beyond the centuries. Okay, yeah. While I was watching that particular show, I was bitterly influenced by his thought process and I wanted to think like him. So I went to the ChatGPT and asked that suggest me such a question so that I would think like Leonardo da Vinci. And this is one of those questions. The question says, how do you think great inventions start from observation, necessity, and imagination? Alright, yeah. So, invention, yes. So, invention means like that ki you kind of like a something invent something or create something or kind of like a something figure it out some sort of ways. Okay, that is called kind of like a something invention. Okay, invention of telephone, invention of mobile phone, invention of kind of like a something something internet. Okay, there is lot of thing. Okay, there is lot of invention that we have and we invented things. Okay, yeah. There are three reasons that are kind of like a simply responsible for invention. What are those three reasons? Okay, first of all, observation. Okay, like whenever there is a some certain situation, we actually kind of like observe the things, and while observing we kind of like invent the things. What is that? Okay, yeah. So it's a kind of like a something very difficult but not that difficult. Okay, just stick with me what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, yeah. So usually is this thing ki if I'm gonna say I invented something, so that means a thing kind of like a something that we could see, we could feel, we could talk, or we could, yeah, like basically say I invented telephone. So telephone is a kind of like a something, a thing, right? A kind of like a thing that we could touch, we could feel it. Okay, yeah. But most of the invention didn't really just kind of like a something, a thing. No, most of the invention are kind of like a something, something really that key, something like that information, or kind of like a something observation, or kind of like a something that key. Some invention are kind of like a something such a thing that a piece of paper, information on piece of paper, that is also kind of like a something invention. What exactly is this thing? Okay, yeah. Like from every point of perspective, just try to figure it out. Invention is not just means like that key a thing. No, invention means like that information of some certain thing. Okay, yeah. Example, all right, yeah. Let's take a telephone. Okay, yeah. So how do you think Graham Bell is a kind of like a person who invented the telephone, right? Yeah. So can you imagine what would kind of like a something instrument he was holding to called as a telephone? Okay, it was kind of like a something so big, like literally, just try to Google it. Okay, the first telephone that Graham Bell invented. Okay, that phone was like a quite and big, literally a like a 4 feet big. It has a kind of like a something a microphone, and it has kind of like a something big. Like it is, yeah, it's a really big thing. Okay, yeah. Like from every point of perspective, you shouldn't supposed to be considered as a telephone, but this is a kind of like a simply telephone. Okay, yeah. And then because of that invention happened, we are try to figure it out that how do we supposed to use it kind of like a something for our convenience, means like that try to be a small, try to be convenient, try to be take this phone with all around the world and still we could communicate. So basically is this thing na ki telephone is actually invented by some sort of person, but the mobile phone that we are actually holding is a kind of like an upgraded version of that telephone. Okay, yeah. So because of the telephone, like we don't really have any kind of like some person who invented the mobile phone. No, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. And we like there is a kind of like a, some sort of person that is invented a mobile phone, but probably is this thing na ki we won't really knew it. Why? Because of that ki like basically telephone and mobile phone is actually pursuing a fun one function which is very common to connect with the people. Okay, yeah. Just kind of like a some very different way. Okay. Right now, if we wanted to use a telephone, we need a wire connection and things like that. And we won't be able to move anywhere. But mobile phone is a kind of like a somebody giving us that freedom, which is kind of like a some upgraded version of telephone. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that ki mobile phone is also kind of like a some invention. Okay, like the chip that we are actually using in the mobile phone is also kind of like a some invention. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing na ki usually there are so many things are invented that we won't be able to knew it. Okay, yeah. And it's kind of like a something is this thing that ki you just have to understand some of the invention is not just meant to be kind of like a thing. No, some of the information is a some of the invention is kind of like a some information or things. Like I'm kind of like a telling you the perspective of the invention, how it looks like. Okay, yeah. It's not kind of like a thing, it's a kind of like a something the information was invented. Firstly, information was invented. Not then after that we actually build some sort of things around that particular information, and that particular thing could kind of like a somebody do that particular process. Okay, example, um let's take a satellite. Okay, yeah, like a basically international space station. Okay, international space station is the invention. Well, it's not, but it's okay. Yeah, let me tell you one thing. What exactly happened? Okay, yeah. So we actually invented that. Ki, what if we kind of like a something throw a some sort of object in kind of like a something a lower Earth orbit, that kind of with proper velocity, that particular object will kind of like a something rotate around the earth without falling, and it kind of like a rotate around its orbit. Okay, which is very crucial, that information that we invented. Okay, yeah. And then we started sending some sort of rocket at the spaceship lower earth orbit. Okay, and it worked. Okay, and then after that we started sending some sort of satellite, some sort of kind of like a something a machine or international space station didn't really just happen just no, like basically the this space station was actually built up by the kind of like a something multiples of nations. They came together and they built some sort of part of this part and that part and that part. The purpose of that international space station is that ki the some sort of scientific experiment won't be able to perform that well on the gravity of the planets. So that's why some of the experiment really required to perform without gravity. Okay, so that's why we built the space station where a scientist could develop such a experiment over there and they will finding some sort of things. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, invention is always kind of like a something happened in the beginning as a information. Okay, yeah. Like we know that we kind of like find out that ki in the lower earth orbit we could kind of like place some sort of orbit object that kind of like a rotate around the sun, rotate around the earth without falling. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of like a something information. Now there are three factors are really essential for invention. Okay, yeah. Observation, then necessity, and then imagination. Okay, these are the three things are required to invent some sort of things. Let's talk from observation. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna give you kind of like simply one of the world famous example that you already knew it. Okay, yeah. When the Newton is actually sit on the apple tree is actually fall on his head, and then Newton is actually find out that the gravity is actually exists. We invented the gravity on that period of time. But is it exactly true? Yeah. Like basically is this thing that apple is actually fall on his head and then suddenly he realized that, oh, gravity, we invented the gravity. No, not really at all. Okay, yeah. It's a kind of like a something is this thing that key uh, probably this definitely gonna happen. It's not kind of like a something very uncommon thing. No, it's a very common thing. Okay, yeah. But the important thing is that na ki he tried to figure it out as a Newton is trying to figure it out that ki why this thing is actually happened, why that apple fall on his head, why it not went up, why it not kind of like a something. He is actually figure it out. Okay, yeah. Try to figure it out what is exactly kind of like some force is actually pulling that particular object, particular apple to the ground. Okay. And he tried to do some sort of variable experiment. Okay, yeah, like basically this thing he tried to fall some sort of object at some certain height and try to figure it out that ki how it kind of like simply behave in its thing and that. Okay, yeah. So he did multiple experiment regarding about every object, regarding about everything, and he realized that ki there is some sort of kind of like a some force is attracted for the every object, so that we are actually feeling this weight, and that weight is not only just a weight of our body. No, it's a kind of like some attraction between us to the planet, and that kind of like some attraction we called as a gravity. Okay, so basically is this thing na ki Newton is kind of like a observe the thing, like he observed things that ki why balls are kind of like a balls or any kind of like something object are fall on the surface of the earth. He kind of like a figure it out every possible way, every object, every material, every medium, and figure it out that ki why this actually happened, why. So after he observed that particular thing, he invented that gravity. Okay, yeah. But is this thing that the gravity is actually exists for millions of year ago, and probably before the Newton there are millions of people are also kind of like a somebody exist. Why they didn't really invent the gravity and the Newton is actually invent the gravity? What makes it Newton so special? That's a really good thing. Newton is kind of like a somebody a person who is always try to find out, or a kind of like a somebody the person who invented thing, that person really required a one thing, and that thing is a curiosity. Curiosity is a really essential to ask question to yourself, to the existence of the universe and things like that, why this thing happened. Okay, and that curiosity is a kind of like a something invention of it's a kind of like a something a factor for the invention probably. Okay, yeah. And why Newton is because of that key, like probably Apple didn't really fall on just a Newton. Like there are multiple people, their Apple is actually fall on their head, and it was kind of like a happened before to the Newton. Yeah. But the problem is that na ki Newton is a kind of like a somebody person who is like a really smart. He has a curiosity regarding about information, always hungry for that ki why this thing happened. There is a unsolved questions, he wanted to solve that particular questions. Okay, yeah. So because of the curiosity and because of that curiosity kind of like a something makes him to observe the things, and because of the information that he collected towards in his lifetime regarding about science and physics, then he became kind of like invented this gravity that we knew it today. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, gravity is a kind of like a a invention of observation. Okay, it's not invention of necessity, it's not the invention of kind of like a something imagination. No, it's a invention of observation. Like this invention is actually happened through the observation skills. Okay, like we observe that thing, and we kind of like a something figure it out that ki this is a kind of like a something way, and we call it as a gravity. Okay, yeah. Now let's talk about the necessity. Okay, let me tell you one thing. most of the invention is actually happened because of the necessity. Okay, yeah. uh, Observation and imagination are have almost like a very slight thing, like a basically this thing. If I'm gonna say, let's take a pie chart. Okay, yeah. So like there are three things required for invention. Okay, yeah. So if I'm gonna say try to draw the graph, then I might realize that the invention is actually happened because of the observation is 5%. The invention is actually happened because of imagination, maybe 15%. But the invention is actually happened because of the necessity, 85%. So this is what kind of like a somebody is saying. Most of the invention is actually happened because of the necessity. How? Okay, let me explain to you. Okay, yeah. So basically, it's this thing that ki early humans are kind of like a something starving. They need a kind of like a something food, and they always rely on hunting. Okay, yeah. Like basically, it's this thing, you just have to go and hunt some sort of animal and cook that particular food and eat that particular food, and then you get food, and then you will not that much starving. Okay, yeah. So early humans have that particular thing. Okay, yeah. But the problem is that because of this hunting, they always have to move at one place to another place. And basically is this thing, at that time going one place to another place is not that much safety, because there are a lot of things, and it is really difficult to survive on that period of time. Okay, yeah. So basically what does they do is that they are started doing farming. Okay, yeah. So what is exactly the farming? Oh yeah. So farming is not just happened in just couple of days. No, nothing really at all. So what is actually happened? Okay. So it just like that, na ki they figure it out that ki if we put some sort of plants in kind of like a samtali in in soil or somewhere, and we gave some sort of water, after a couple of time that plant became tree, and that trees is actually giving us some sort of fruit, which kind of like a something act as a food. Okay, yeah. So basically this is what kind of like a something is this thing happened. Okay, at the early humans, they are actually a bit more focused on kind of like a something that key make a kind of like a something such a plant which kind of like a giving us a fruit which is kind of like a act as a food. Okay, yeah. So farming is actually started. Okay, we are actually building this and that and that and that. Now, let me tell you one thing. Now, during the farming, we don't really have any much tool to how to do that thing. Let's say, like in Marathi word, we actually call as an anger. Okay, yeah. What's an anger? A nanger is a kind of like a something tool which kind of like a something create a some sort of dig a hole in a kind of like a something a soil, which kind of like a something you put the seed into it, and you just put throw some sort of water. Okay, yeah. But it really required to dig a hole. Okay, yeah. There is also kind of like a something way to dig a hole is that ki a stick. If you have a kind of like a very strong stick, you could kind of like hit the ground, and then you dig the hole and things like that. But it take time consuming. Okay, yeah. And probably for kind of like a planting a tree, we don't really require that much amount of big hole. No, we just need a kind of like a something just couple of inches, that's it. Okay, yeah. So we need a kind of like a something tool, and that tool we invented because of the necessity, because we have the necessity. So that's why we build that particular tool about the farming and things like that. Okay, yeah. Let's say another example is a telephone. Okay, yeah. Like at that time, the early telephone was kind of like a so big that it is kind of like a very difficult to lift because it was so heavy and things like that. And as also early telephone was kind of like a something such a thing that very big, and it's not able to move. And as also if you wanted to communicate with the people, that person won't be able to move, that he has to be person has to be stay into that particular place and take the information, take the calls and things like that. Okay, so which is kind of like a something very not convenient. Okay, so they started making telephone less and less small. Okay, try to make kind of like a little less weight, try to make kind of like a some little less wire and things like that. Okay, yeah. So because of we kind of like a somebody make that telephone as convenient as it, right now we are holding a mobile phone. It's also kind of like a something necessity, the invention of necessity. Means like that ki we actually invented a telephone, but the mobile phone is kind of like a something invention of necessity, because we really required some sort of necessity of all those things, so that's why we create this mobile phone. Okay, yeah. So this is what necessities actually happened. Okay, yeah. Necessity is really essential to upgrade yourself. Okay, yeah. If you don't really kind of like need anything, we won't be able to invent anything. Okay, yeah, that is really essential. Okay, as also is this thing, the nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah, is this thing that ki at the World War II, like Japan and Germany is a kind of like a something a power which kind of like a won't be able to stop. Okay, and the stopping the war is a kind of like a something really essential, and we need a kind of like a such a power that kind of like a something so much that it kind of like a destroy everything. Okay, yeah. So that necessity, because of that necessity, we actually invented the nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah. So so because of the necessity we built such a thing. Okay, and that is kind of like a something like that ki um like a really great. Okay, yeah. um so this is what kind of like a something invention of necessity. Okay, yeah. Now another thing is imagination. Okay, yeah. Imagination, the like invention of imagination, like basically if we invented some sort of thing through the imagination, is a really cool thing. Okay, yeah. What exactly is this thing? Is there any kind of like some invention is actually happened because of the imagination? Yeah, there is. Okay, what are those? Okay, yeah. Okay, so basically is this thing कि early like when the humans, like early humans, I'm not talking about the humans so early, no, I'm talking about basically we have kind of like a theory regarding about how does our earth look like. Okay, yeah. And at that time people are actually kind of like a consider as earth is a flat. Okay, yeah. And we are actually center in the universe, and earth and the sun and the moon and every planet is actually revolve around us. Okay, why we actually think like that is because of that ki at that time we won't be able to have a satellite to go outside, and we won't be able to have that aeroplane and things like that. Almost like a 500 or 600 year ago we actually think like that ki earth is a flat surface. Okay, yeah. And in that flat surface we have mountains, we have ocean, we have things and everything. Okay, but Copernicus is kind of like a started imagine things. Okay, yeah. If our earth is a flat, then why we are not seeing other mountains? Like there are so many big mountains. Okay, why we are not seeing those mountain? Okay, yeah. Why, what is actually the reason behind it? They kind of like a figure it out. Okay, yeah. As also they try to look up and try to figure it out that ki why the moon look kind of like a something very different. Like sometime it look full moon, sometime it look half moon. Why it look like that? Okay, yeah. They are asking questions and they are trying to imagine things that ki why is actually things is actually happened. Okay, yeah. And then he realized that ki our earth is not a flat, is a kind of like a something like a sphere. And they have kind of like a some evidence that ki if our earth is a flat, then probably why we are not seeing the other mountain and things like that. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing na ki they also look at the star and they figure it out, the moon is look circle, the sun is also look circle or sphere. So probably our planet is also kind of like a look like a sphere, it will not a flat. Okay, so this is kind of like a something we are started imagine things. Okay, yeah. And at that time as a Copernicus is kind of like a something present that particular thought process to the church, because at that time there is no scientific community, there is a science was not exist on that period of time. Like there is also religious temples who is kind of like a controlling all those thought process and things like that. So basically is this thing Copernicus went there and kind of like a talk to those people that ki earth is not flat, earth is a sphere. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing na ki this is invention is actually happened because of the imagination. Copernicus didn't really went to the space and look at the stars and look at the planet earth. No, nothing really at all. Okay. So basically is this thing they actually imagine things that ki this is kind of like a stuff is actually happened, so that why our planet is not a flat, it's a kind of like a something spherical. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like a something invention of imagination. Like we imagine things and invention is actually happened. Okay, yeah. So there are multiple things by the way. Okay, yeah. Multiple things regarding about invention of imagination. No, it's just like that. Invention is actually happened because of the imagination. Okay, but let me tell you one thing now. Right now in this world, okay, we not only rely only on this, like invention, imagination, and necessity. No, okay, yeah, yeah. These are the main crux, by the way. Yeah, but let me tell you one thing now. Right now, if we wanted to invent some sort of thing, we have information. We do have information. We just have to kind of like stick the information one and each other and figure it out the puzzle and things like that. Example, that key why we won't be like at this moment, like in 2025 we are kind of like a want to step human onto the Mars. Okay, we wanted to kind of like put the human on the Mars. Why we are not doing it? Okay, yeah, because of that key, because of that key, it's a kind of like something we could do that. We have that kind of like a some technology so that we went to the Mars and kind of like a simply put the human on the Mars. Okay, yeah. But problem is that na ki the way that we have is kind of like a something not safer. Okay, yeah, we could do that. Definitely we could do that, but it's not really that safe way. Okay, we don't really have. It might be kind of like a something 50-50 chances that might be this mission gonna successful or might be this mission gonna fail. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing sending a humans to the another planet is a kind of like a something very essential or very very big thing. Okay, like basically before the humans we could send so many satellites and robots and things like that. It didn't really get that much human traffic, but when you send some sort of human on the planet on another planet on the Mars, then it became kind of like a very big thing. So that for that big thing, every person need to be considered as that mission should supposed to be kind of like a something something really that ki good, like a some like a successful. For that successful rate of parameter, we don't really achieve that rate of successful parameter. We have only still 50-50%. Okay, yeah. If we build up such a technology so that we went to kind of like another planet, then we will definitely went to the another planet. Okay, but because of why we are not sending humans to the another planet is because the way that we have is not that much safe. Okay, yeah. But what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that right now, if we wanted to invent some sort of thing, we are actually putting all those things: necessity, imagination, observation, and we could do all those things to invent such things. Okay, yeah. So I think this is kind of like a something way as a human could kind of like a great invention start from observation, necessity, and imagination. These are kind of like a some pointers that I mentioned. By the way, some of the pointers are ChatGPT is actually mentioned. Let's talk about that. Observation, learning from the world. Many invention come from the simply noticing the pattern, problem, or opportunity in the world around us. Example, Isaac Newton observed an apple falling on the formulate the laws of gravity, which later influenced the modern physics, as I mentioned earlier. Example number two, the invention of Velcro came from the George they must notice how burn stuck into his dog fur and leading to the practical. Oh, that I didn't really knew it. Okay, yeah. Velcro. Okay, if you don't, you know Velcro. Okay, if you don't really know Velcro, okay, yeah. Like a basically is this thing. There is a one surface who is kind of like a bag. Like let's take a bag, like basically you carrying the suitcase or any kind of like a something bag which has kind of like a something is this thing that ki a kind of like a black kind of like a cloth which is kind of like a one black cloth is a very soft, another back cloth is a kind of like a something very hard. When you stick that together it kind of like a stick it, and you just have to rip that off when it kind of like a something move and stuff like that. Velcro is a kind of like that thing is actually happen in the bags. Okay, yeah, any kind of like a school bag or travel bag, this velcro is kind of like something available over there, which actually happened because of like which this invention is actually happened is because of the kind of like a somebody dog fur which is kind of like a somebody try to attract and try to kind of like a stick it and won't be able to move such a thing. Okay, it's really good thing by the way, I'm not really sure about that, but still. Another point, necessity, solving the problem for survival and convenience. Okay, yeah, like a mobile phone that I already mentioned. Okay, yeah, imagination, thinking through beyond. Some invention arise from the pure creativity and wisdom, which is directly problem at the hand. Example, the concept of smartphone. Oh yeah, like it wasn't necessary. Well, basically, this thing I think that key. Wait. Like a smartphone is a kind of like a something imagination, na? Dude. Like a, we are not just like a smartphone is not kind of like a serving just a call. No, we could do lot of things in the smartphone. So it's a kind of like a something we are actually imagine that ki, how do we put multiple things into the mobile phone like alarm, calculator, internet into one small device. It's a kind of like some imagination. So yeah. So yeah. All right, so these are kind of like a things are represent to invention and stuff like that. Whatever, this is it, this then, and thank you.